VDBs are a great way of creating fully customizable geometry quickly that holds up without needing to go into modelling or sculpting. Now, this of course depends on the situation, but if we don't get too close or we don't need to create something specific, then VDBs may be the way to go. They work in voxels, which can then be converted into geometry or fog if you want to use it for volumetrics. So the process I want to take a look at here is to block the geometry out using simple geo, then subtract the shapes from this, and after this we can put it through an attribute or volume VOP to add some more details before converting it all to geometry. And next week we can add some more details when we take a look at shading. So let's make a small castle turret as an example. I'll drop down a tube in a geo node, make a mesh, and then add some subdivisions and increase the size. Let's put down a poly extrude to add some thickness. Make sure to output back so we get the inside of this. VDBs need to work with closed geometry, so whatever you create here needs to be completely filled in. And again, let me just put down a facet node to make sure we have normals, and this is just because as this is going to be a turret, I want to scatter some bricks on the surface of this. I'll also cusp them here. Take a look, these are fine. I'll create a little brick here. Cool. And drop down a scatter node. And a copy to points. Nice. Just up the count here. And then change the scale using an attribute wrangle just to randomize the scale a little, like we did previously. Okay, they're maybe a little thin. Let me just thicken them up a little. Not that much. And reduce the count. Okay, now all we need to do is convert this into a VDB. So we'll pick VDB from polygons. Before I do this, let me just change this voxel size to 1. This is in world space, so this is meters. If it's too low, it could take you a long time to see what the final result is. So if we set this to 1, we can then start to dial this down until we get the amount of information we need. Not 0. This is probably fine. And at the end of this, we would convert this back to polygon. So we can convert VDB to polygons and plug this in. And it's quite dense, but you can see what we get here. And it's pretty cool. Even though it only took a second to create this, from a distance this would be okay. But let's just add a lot more to this. The first thing I want to do is add in some windows and maybe some doors. So let me just create some of these, just using some more tubes. I'll drop down an edit node just to make this more of an archway. I'm pressing M here to cycle through the different spaces that we can transform this within. Scale this down. Okay, and make sure I have cap selected. As I mentioned, this needs to be solid geometry. Cool. And I'll just move this into place with a transform. I'll make this visible. If you want to make an object completely visible and stay in the viewport whilst you're working, you just control and click on this little template tab here. And merge these together. And create our own VDB from these. Nice. Now before we convert these, I want to subtract these guys from this guy. Let me just turn this back off. Again, control clicking. And use the VDB combine. And I'll set this to SDF difference. Now it's not really working, and that's only because these guys here aren't quite wide enough. So let me just fix this. That's a bit better. Now they're longer. They are cutting right through. Cool. So if we convert this to geometry now, you can see our new tower. Let me just add some crenellations to the top here. I can do that just using a copy. Drop down a copy and transform. Now we get some quick crenellations up here. It's a bit ugly. Let me just increase this scatter to make it a little smoother. And we can also add some noise to this afterwards. Make these a bit thinner too. Oh, not that thin. Another thing I would like to subtract is just some damage. So I'll use a sphere here with a mountain noise. And you can see we can add some quick holes to this. I can drop down a clean node just to get rid of all of these floating points. Let me just clean this up. And now drop down an attribute VOP. Now I'm using an attribute VOP here to add noise as opposed to a mountain SOP because the mountain SOP works on points, whereas if we use the noise inside the attribute VOP, it works on world space. So let me drop this in, drop down and add. We're going into the position. And then decreasing the frequency and increasing the amplitude. Now this is by no means perfect, but from a distance, even mid-distance, this would hold up. And this is perhaps taking 10-15 minutes to create. So you can imagine how easy it would be to create a whole castle that holds up from at least mid-distance, especially if we go ahead after this and add in some interesting textures on top. Cool, so that's it for this week. Just wanted to quickly show you the power of using this. What I would probably do is then drop down a poly reduce just to make this more efficient, and of course use a UV just to make sure that we are UVing this, and so we have something to use within the shader. Okay, so the next video will be the assignment, and next week we will move on to lighting and shading.